Alright, so this A2159 13-inch MacBook Pro has a problem with the LCD panel. You can either swap out the entire display assembly, which is a much easier repair, or you can swap out just the LCD panel on an issue like this. This may even be repairable with work on the flex cable, the display flex cable, but that's not what I'm going to do today. I'm just going to swap out the whole LCD panel and get it fixed that way. You can see on the bottom of the computer the model number right here. It says designed by Apple in California, assembled in China, model number A2159. All right, so we'll start by removing the 6 screws that are on the bottom. These 2 at the top are the same, one on each side. And then on the bottom, we have 1 on each side that are the same, and then the 2 in the middle are the same. So you have a total of 3 different sizes of screws on the bottom here. So make sure you keep them organized in a way that you can remember which one goes where. Then the next step is to use a suction cup and a spudger. So you lift with the suction cup, work the spudger in just around the side, work it around until it pops on that side, and then work it around so it pops on the other side. Once they're popped, you can lift with your finger and pop the ones in the center. It's because there's 2 more right about here and here. All right, now that it's popped up a little bit, you can use your spudger again. Put it in between the bottom here and the display and just lightly push it so it heads towards the bottom direction of the laptop, and that will unhook these hooks here, and it just slides right off. So now we have the bottom off. First step is to disconnect the battery, so I'll switch it back over again here. I will remove this cover, use a spudger to disconnect the cable for the battery, which is underneath this guy here. It has a little rocking connector. Pull that out, and then you use your T5 and unscrew this screw here that's holding down the battery connector and lift it up. So now we have no battery connected, so we're safe to proceed with removing the display assembly. So I'll switch it around again, and I'm going to start with my T5, since I have it handy. I'm going to remove the screw that holds the antenna cables in place, and then I'm going to remove the 4 screws that are holding this T-con board down. All right, and now I'm going to remove with my T3 the hinge covers. There's 2 screws holding down each of the hinge covers. And I'm going to remove the screws holding this down here. These ones are a little longer. Again, 2 on each side. And then I'm going to remove the screws. Actually, I'm not going to remove those, because maybe you're just replacing the display assembly, and we don't need to pull those off if we're going to be just replacing the display assembly. So I'll remove those later when I go to do the LCD panel. This little guy comes off. All right, then you lift up the LVDS cable off the T-con board. I like to disconnect the antennas right now. All right, those are disconnected. And then you get the same screwdriver that you use to, it's a 1PL. And this guy is used to remove the screws from this antenna here. These are all identical screws. So no reason to keep them separate. You can keep them all together. All right, now that those are all removed, we'll be able to remove this antenna here. So I like to use a spudger and just lift it up gently on the other side, and then work the antenna cables out from where they are going through the top case here. So you kind of guide them out, turn this so the antenna tips come out, and you're all set. All right, now we can open up the MacBook Pro, get close to the edge, and lay it down like this. That will allow us to remove the hinge screws and pull the display off easily. All right, now that we have our hinge screws off, what you want to do is open the display kind of like all the way, and that will allow the hinges here to be lifted up and out of the top case. There we go. So now we have just our display. Now if you're if you're going to replace just the display assembly, this is as far as you go. You get your new display assembly and you go to install it on your MacBook Pro. All right, so for the reassembly on this A2159, I have a good fully working display assembly now. I swapped out the LCD panel, so this is ready to put back on the computer. So we'll start that process now. So what I like to do is get the computer close to the edge and then make sure all the cabling is pulled back, so you can just slide it right back in here. All right, and then I put in 2 screws, one on each side, just to hold it in place. Once those are screwed in, I close it, carefully close it so you don't accidentally have something in the keyboard area like these cables or anything like that. So you close it carefully, and then I loosen these 2 screws just a hair. And once those are loosened, I rest the computer on the front edge, which will line up the hinges just about perfect. And I double check that they're lined up by just moving my thumb on both sides where the hinges are connected and make sure it's nice and smooth, and it is. So I tighten this guy down, and tighten this guy down, and then add in the other 4 screws. All right, now that the hinges are on, we need to put back in the antenna cable. So what we do for this guy is we, actually, you know what, before I put this in, I like to screw down these 2. So I'm gonna do that first. screwing these in kind of keeps them out of the way a little bit for this next step. So with this guy, what you want to do is you want to feed the antennas through this little slot that is right here. And you just feed them through. And once they're through, then you want to look at the inside here, and there's a slot for the little edge to go in. So you push that in. All right, now that's seated nicely. And then what I like to do is put in some of those teeny tiny screws on this antenna assembly here to kind of hold it in place. It's all lined up nicely right now. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and put in all the screws on this antenna assembly. All these screws are the exact same size, so you don't need to keep track of which one goes where, or which one's from the left, or which one's from the right. They're all the same. All right, last one. That is done. Now what I like to do is plug in the LVDS cable. You can kind of see what you're doing with it open like this. So I plug that in, and then I bring this down, and I put in the screws that hold this T-Con board down. So there's the 4 screws that hold this one down. I don't screw them in all the way at first. I just put them in kind of lightly. That allows me to make sure everything is really situated exactly the way it's supposed to be, and then I screw them in. All right, and then I'll add the antenna screw over here. And then I will go ahead and attach those antenna. All right, and then I'm gonna put down the cover for the antenna, I'm sorry, for the LVDS cable. And then I'll also put down the secondary cover here. All right, next I put on the hinge covers. And then when the hinge covers are in place, the next thing is just to reconnect the battery. So I just flip it back around, push the battery connector back down, screw in that screw. Now it's connected, and then you just connect this data line for the battery here. And don't forget to push down that locking rocker. Grab a black stick here, and you just push that down. There. All right, and this little guy goes on like so. All right, now we'll put the bottom back on here. All right, that's in. Again, one on the right, one on the left, and then right in the middle. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and screw this bottom on. Remember that you have 3 different kinds of screws that go in the bottom, so be sure you have the screws back into the spots where they're supposed to go. All right, and we are done. So now we just give it power. It won't turn on without power. So even if the battery's fully charged right now, it will not boot unless it's plugged in, because we had the battery disconnected. So if you push the power button, nothing happens. But now that we have it plugged in, we just wait. It takes a minute. You don't have to push the power button or anything. It'll just boot up on its own. But it does take a little bit, and there we go. So we'll let it boot all the way so you can see how good it looks with a fully working display. And before, we got bars on the screen right about now, and now it loads all the way up and everything looks perfect. So that's it, you're done. You finished replacing the display assembly on an A2159 MacBook Pro, 13-inch MacBook Pro.